Welcome, everybody, to 914 Wired, one of the hopefully soon-to-be premier podcasts on Westchester County and other environs nearby, like the Bronx and northern New Jersey and other counties. I'm Peter Moses. I'm here with the person who is the inspiration for the podcast, Charles Stern, and Ardina Seward, who has been friends with me for 40 years. Right, Ardina? Long time. And since you're only 37, I knew you prenatally. Now, today's show is a special show. We have with us County Executive George Latimer. Now, George has been our county executive for a couple of terms, and has decided that he is going to run for Congress, and the primary is against the incumbent, Jamaal Bowman. These are very, very different people, Charles, George, and Jamaal. And I just want to remind our listeners and viewers that George Latimer has run for many different offices and to date has never lost one. So if I'm Jamaal Bowman, I am quaking in my boots. George, why are you running for Congress now?
Well, thank you, Peter, Charles, Ardina, for being with you. I'm running because what I see in Washington is really very concerning. And I think it's not just the run-of-the-mill argument about we could do better. We're at an inflection point in Washington where the system that we have built democracy on might collapse. We have turned into a debating society for social issues, for culture war issues in Washington, and we don't need to exacerbate that. We don't need to be arguing on the steps of the Capitol. We don't need to be having dueling press conferences. We need to focus on results, specific, tangible results that will make people's lives better. In my career, and I'm flattered that I've had electoral success, although I'm always mindful that the New England Patriots a number of years ago were undefeated until the Giants beat them in the Super Bowl. So
that's not a tangible point. I'm sorry.
But the bottom line is that the things that I've done over my career have been focused on trying to accomplish end products. Here for the last 6 years, I'm in my 7th year now as county executive. I can point to a long list of things. I won't do it right now, but I'll be happy to have it come out of the questions, of things that we've done on housing, things that we've done on job growth, things that we've done on climate change, things that we've done for social and racial justice, things that are concrete that have actually occurred, because that's what the focus has to be in government. People are cynical. They're ready to turn away from democracy. They think it's all a big joke. It's all a big, effort for ego and scratch ego. And if we don't convince people that we can show how we can make their lives better, they're going to turn their back on democracy. So you run for office because you believe you have something to say. Keep in mind, what I'm doing is not entering in a boxing match with somebody. I'm offering a choice. When Democratic voters go to the primary ballot, they'll have a choice. And if they like the direction that they're going in now, if they like the incumbent and what he's done and how he's doing it, they can vote for him. And they'll have an alternative. And that alternative will give them a certain philosophy. We'll talk about that while we're together. And then at the end of that process, the primary is over. I have no intent to run beyond the primary if I lose. But I want to be able to articulate what I think has really been a lifelong commitment to results, not rhetoric. And that, I think, is needed if we're talking about who's going to go to Washington, D.C.
So, George, again, thank you for coming on the program. And you've always made yourself available to this show, so thank you for that. There's a couple of big anchor issues that seem to be motivating people to be interested in this primary: abortion, Israel. You mentioned the threat to democracy. But, beyond the big rocks, what are some of the things that maybe you want to talk about that you can actually accomplish something on, where there's a tangible difference between you and your opponent with respect to policy?
Well, the first thing is that when you look at how difficult it is to accomplish things in a legislative body, you have to remember what the role of a legislator is. A legislator is not a spokesperson for a movement. You have the opportunity to speak and have a public platform. But talking about your philosophies and your ideas about what direction the society should go in is not the main thrust of a legislator. I've been a state senator, a state assemblyman, a county legislator, et cetera. It's legislation, It's getting dollar resources from within executive discretion back to your district to deal with issues and problems in your backyard. And to that point, I think that the communities that are in the district, as the district exists today, are both urban and suburban. Not one or the other, but both of them. And there are needs in both of those different areas. I alluded to some of them when I talked about some of the things that we have done during my county executive years. Housing. Affordable housing is essential, and we can't provide deep affordability, in other words, housing for the very poorest of our people, unless we have federal money to do that. And that requires you not just to vote for a bill to put money in for housing, but you've got to get inside the administration, inside HUD. You've got to be able to get designated resources that will go into the poorest neighborhoods of this district. And it's one thing to connect with the poorest people symbolically and emotionally, but you have to be able to deliver something that's concrete. Let me give you an example in what I've done in county government. Memorial Field, Charles, you know it well as a resident of your home area. Memorial Field lay fallow for 12 years. It was a mess. It was a dumping ground, and you had mayors and county executives that talked about doing it and what has to be done. When I came into office, I'm just the next guy in office. What's he going to do any different? Except that I'm a kid from Mount Vernon. I grew up on the South Side, went to South Side schools, and played on that field. Was not a football player, but played on that field in other ways. And I got my high school diploma on that field. And when I saw what was wrong with it, I knew what it would take for us to get it back. And it was tough. We had to go through lots of financial and engineering issues. We had to get people from the city and the county all in line. Blah 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 blah. And now look at it. That's an example of concrete result. When you look at the environmental issues at the federal government level, and you say, we need to have a Green New Deal, and the Green New Deal is an omnibus bill, and people argue, yes, we have to have the Green New Deal. I support the Green New Deal. But it's not moving forward. So you need to use your legislative skill set where you have this kind of a gridlock and figure out what pieces of that bill can you pull out, what pieces can you find bipartisan support for so that you can move forward water quality or move forward on an air quality component of it if you can't get all of it. And that is the pragmatism that comes with seeing things move forward and making
So you've been a
people's lives
legislator.
better. The person who is a single family parent, they want to see their lives better. They don't want to hear, what you're advocating for. They want to see what happens in concrete terms. That's an example of housing, transportation, climate change, jobs, those things that I talked about up front, which I think are the bread and butter issues that we're facing in Washington going forward.
You've been a legislator. You've stair-stepped. You're one of these people who has had a lot of different jobs in public life, in the arena, going way back. And I suspect you are probably amongst a very small number of people that have an extraordinary understanding of what people actually care about in the suburbs, and particularly in the political world within the suburbs. What do you think? I mean, you mentioned affordable housing. That's one I certainly hear about a lot. But where are the Democratic primary voters? Where do you think is the locus of their interest in this race?
Well, it's not a singular singular issue. There's a set of issues that depend on where you are demographically, economically in your life. For somebody who is in the LGBTQ community, they want to see the kind of respect and opportunity, the dropping of barriers of prejudice that are reflected to the LGBTQ community. We've done some of that in Westchester County. There's legislation in Washington that would address some of those issues. From a woman's standpoint, there are women who are very concerned about Roe v. Wade being overturned and the loss of the right to choose what is best for women's health. And a Congress might impose legislation that would limit a right to abortion, depending on who's sitting in Washington and how that plays out. That becomes an important issue to that individual. You go up and down the line, the people in organized labor that see an effort being made across the aisle to reduce the power and the scope of organized labor and thereby reducing their ability to get the proper kind of wages for the kind of work that they do. So the legislator that you send has to hold certain philosophies and policies. And I think in that regard, my record is clear in terms of its progressivity. You go down, check off issue after issue after issue. I've dealt with all of these issues over a long, long period of time. The question then becomes, how do you accomplish the mission? I have served already with 9 members of the House of Representatives from New York in the state legislature. Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, and I served in the state assembly. I also served with Grace Meng, Joe Morelli, Paul Tonko, Adriano Espaillat, and quite likely Tim Kennedy, who is likely to win the seat up in the Buffalo area. And then I've served with some of the Republicans, Mark Molinaro, Claudia Tenney, and so forth. Pat Ryan was a county executive in Ulster County, who's now a member of Congress. What does that mean? When I walk in the door, I'm looking to make coalitions on issues. Now, we may not be in agreement on every issue, but we find issues that we can agree upon, and we push to get resolution on those areas. Pat and I work together to try to help stop Indian Point releasing polluted water down the Hudson River. That was an important issue to the river towns in this county because they were concerned that pollution could despoil their waterfront. That's not an issue that mattered over in New Rochelle. In New Rochelle, different set of issues matter. But you have to be attentive to all of them, and including in the Bronx. And I might add that although I'm identified as a Westchester county executive and public official, I grew up on the south side of Mount Vernon, literally across the street from the border of the Bronx. I went to college in the Bronx. I had my first full-time job in the Bronx, and, I have to admit, my first girlfriend was from the Bronx. That didn't work out, but my other experiences with the Bronx worked out pretty well. So I'm not just some guy from Westchester County. What does he know about the Bronx? I understand that there are urban needs in Wakefield and in Williamsbridge and Edenwald sections, Edenwald houses down there, Co-op City, Baychester, Woodlawn. All of those neighborhoods are affected in certain ways similar to the way parts of Westchester are affected by these policies. So what I say on the policy issues, first of all, as a congressman, I'm going to do exactly what I did as a state senator and a state assemblyman. I'm going to go into every one of these communities, into the local governments, the community boards in the Bronx serve that purpose, or the village towns and city governments. And I'm going to be present. I'm going to go to their meetings and sit and talk. And what's the agenda that Harrison has? What's the agenda that the village of Ardsley has to try to put together an understanding of what their priorities are? And then out of that, work to try to help deliver on those priorities, and by extension, be active in these community events. I mean, I don't sit in an office in White Plains all day. I'm out in the community, and when you're out in the community, people come up to you and they talk to you, and they tell you generally when they don't like things, and you absorb that, and then you try to adjust to that. So
let Ardina get a word in here.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah, by all means.
Up in there for a second, George. You talked about growing up in Mount Vernon. You also, I believe, were quoted as saying that you were the only white guy in a group of, basically in a black neighborhood. But you also said at the same time that if there is redistricting that expands the compass, that expands the Bronx territory, that would lessen your chances of winning. Is that because that would increase the number of black voters? And although you grew up in a black environment, you think that black voters would vote for Bowman as opposed to you? Or is there a kind of thinking that the black vote is an homogenous vote?
This has nothing to do with race, Ardina. This has to do with where you're known. I'm known in Westchester County. I've run numerous races in Westchester County. If you reduce the amount of Westchester in the district and you increase the amount of Bronx in the district, I am unknown in the Bronx. And I have to introduce myself to people, black people, white people, Latinos, Asian, gay, straight. That's what that comment was about. If you go further into the Bronx, the district lines will go what they are. But I was asked a question, and I gave them an honest answer. Right now, the district is 85% Westchester, 15% Bronx. If the district goes deeper into the Bronx, I am disadvantaged by that. The incumbent has represented parts of the Bronx in past years. He is advantaged by that. The reverse is also true. If somehow there was more Westchester put into the district, then I would be advantaged by that because of name recognition, not race. I grew up in a black neighborhood. I went to schools that were 85% African American. I was a tenant leader of an organization 65% African American. I appointed the first African American to be deputy county executive, who is now extremely likely to be my successor. I voted for the first African American, Andrea Stewart Cousins, and worked on her behalf to become the Senate Majority Leader. I stepped aside after 2 terms as a board chairman of the Board of Legislators to have the first black woman, Lois Bronze, become chair. So it's not about black-white in my mind. I think I've stood behind black and white and Asian and Latino people, and I'll put my record before any voter, and then they choose who they want. It is a matter of where's your name recognition, and my name recognition is not prominent in the Bronx. That's what that's about.
There's a second follow-up question that I have
Sure.
to that. In terms of name recognition, it's a poor segue, but you are scheduled to have a meet and greet in Larchmont this week with Alex Dubitsky, and he is a Trump supporter, Republican, but there has been a group of Republicans that are rallying behind you because of your stand on Israel. You're also getting the big bucks from AIPAC. So Bowman is accusing you, one, of not being loyal to the Democrats because you are going to the lair of a Republican donor, a
Okay,
large.
Ardina, can I address those issues, if I
Yes.
may? Thank you. First of all, anybody who thinks I haven't been a good Democrat for the last 35 years has not been paying attention. I have supported Democrats for positions up and down the line. This is what unfortunately happens in a political campaign. People use whatever they think is an effective argument against you to try to paint you in a different way. I'm the guy that brought free buses, treated the migrants with respect. Yeah, I'm a MAGA guy. That's just politics. Now, let me deal with the fundraiser first. The fundraiser is sponsored. It happened, by the way, as we're having this conversation, it happened over the weekend. It was sponsored. I was invited to have a fundraiser at the home of Pamela Dubitsky. Pamela is the wife of Alex Dubitsky. Pamela is a friend of mine. I've known her in Larchmont for many years. Pamela is a Democrat who has donated to Hillary Clinton and Kathy Hochul and so forth. Her husband, Alex Dubitsky, is a Republican who has donated to Republicans. The invitation list, we had 50 people there. 47 of them were Democrats, including Democratic county legislators, people in the village of Larchmont and Mamaroneck Town and so forth. The argument that was made was a pounce. It was a pounce because they're concerned that I have a viable candidacy. So they want to paint me as something that I'm not. Alex Dubitsky, the husband, is conservative, but the person who put this on for me is a Democrat, and she has her friends there, and that's who was at that fundraiser. And we had a very good time. Now, as far as being funded by AIPAC and all this other stuff, that also is the attack that's coming from the opponent's side. You noticed I haven't attacked him at all on this. I haven't started to say he's this, he's that, he's the other thing. I've talked about how I would be a congressman and laid out a positive plan, because that's the way you unify people, not by attacking the other person. But in terms of AIPAC, we're going to have numbers that are going to be released as we're speaking today, probably in the next 10 days or so, as to how we did through the end quarter of December. And when you get those numbers, look at the donors that I have and look at the donors that my opponent has, and look at how many people have donated to me who live in Westchester County. I'll have a few in the Bronx, but not many. But clearly, the people who know me are the people who are donating to this campaign. And then look at how much donation is coming from outside the district. Because the argument that's being made is that there's this evil group of people, and they live in Chicago, and they live in L.A., and they want George Latimer to be congressman. What you're going to find is there are people who live in New Rochelle and Larchmont and Scarsdale and White Plains who want George Latimer to be a congressman. That's what you'll see on the ground. As far as AIPAC is concerned, we have different opinions, the incumbent and I do, about what the role is of America's response in terms of Israel. My position is in the mainstream of the Democratic Party. Joe Biden and the Democratic majority in the Congress is working through trying to use our leverage with our ally Israel to conduct themselves in as reasonable a way as they can. Israel was the victim of a vicious terrorist attack. Vicious. I don't even want to be specific about it. We've all seen those examples. The alternate point of view, as expressed by my incumbent and the incumbent and some other people in the conference, the squad as they're known, 9 or 10 people who sit with an alternate point of view. But my position is the mainstream point of view. And when you mention AIPAC, make sure you mention that AIPAC funds half of the Congressional Black Caucus. They fund Hakeem Jeffries, Grace Meng, Richie Torres, and Greg Meeks, all of whom are Congress members of color who represent New York. So the image that's trying to be made is that somehow AIPAC is this group that's supporting George Latimer, because of my ethnicity against the incumbent because of his ethnicity. And then you throw the Dubitsky thing on top, and he's not really a good Democrat. This is the strategy of a campaign. But what I know, Ardina, is I've been around a long time and I've met a lot of people. And people know who I am. They know me better and worse. And I don't think those kind of attacks are going to matter. The only thing that matters is what you can say about what you intend to do in the future, and can you connect with people. And I'm going to try to do that to the best of my ability, and then I'll let people make their decision.
During the time Bowman has been in Congress, before you decided to run, What was your working relationship with him? And has he done anything for Westchester that you championed to him in conversation?
Well, we met fairly early on I believe after he won the primary. We had a meeting. It was very pleasant. I've seen him at a number of different events. He and a couple of members of his staff did come here to meet with us early in his tenure when he took office. And we talked about some of the issues that we as a county government faced. And we extended the offer to, interact with our county departments and any of those issues that we overlap on. We haven't had a bad relationship. We haven't had a particularly good relationship. I know that some of the people who are around him. One of his key aides is a person that I appointed to one of our boards and commissions because Quantel Bazemore. He was a former elected official when he was in Ossining, and we put him on one of our boards, I believe a housing-related board, because he's a good person. So we haven't had a contentious relationship. But by the same token, I also know that there's an essential connection that you need to have with local governments, and that local government connection is what I intend to do at a very intense level if I become the congressman. I've done it before as a senator and as an assemblyman, and it's not just you show up with earmark money, which we had in the assembly as well. You try to be creative about ways that you can help your community. We figured out to find a revenue stream using hotel occupancy tax that has benefited the city of New Rochelle, the village of Rye Brook, and the city of Rye during my tenure as an assemblyman. I wasn't a senior assembly member, and I still managed to be able to access that money, which gave direct stream of revenue to those communities, and that helps fund their programs, the senior programs, the parks programs. So to me, I understand how to work with those local governments. I communicate with them all the time in my current role, in my past roles. I would do that going forward. And I think you'd see exactly, the way that I would be a hands-on congressman. You'd see me around the district in all contexts, in the suburban communities as well as in the urban
George, this month
communities.
there was a big storm, January 9th. You alluded to the issue earlier, flooding. January 9th, there was a point at which all lanes on the Sawmill Parkway were blocked by water. The
BRP too.
Route 9A blocked by water.
All of them. That's why they're called River Parkways. The river and the
Bronx
parkway
River
becomes
Parkway,
one.
both directions closed. Hutchinson River Parkway, ponding here and there. You go to Washington. I don't know a way to fix this problem without intervention by the United States government, because who else is going to have enough money to solve this? So what I'm looking for here, and you seem like a problem-solving guy, what do you do when you get down there to bring some resources back to address these really serious problems? And I didn't even mention Metro North was down, too.
Right. So, Charles, the first thing you do is you look for how many other congressional districts, Republican and Democrat, were also savaged by flooding. Northern New Jersey was devastated in the same floods we're talking about. We got hit badly. They got hit worse. You look at the states in Connecticut, perhaps in Pennsylvania, and you form on a particular issue a coalition of legislators that have a common interest. You don't issue a press release yourself. George Latimer has a plan for flooding. You don't go out in front of the cameras. It might get you on MSNBC or something, but it doesn't advance the issue. You work through those legislators, and certainly I would go down as a junior member, but even if I were there for a couple of terms, I'd still be a junior member. The guys with real juice are there for 20, 30 years. You form coalitions, you form them within your party, and you try to form them across the aisle so that you can get attention to solve these issues and problems. And you get targeted money, revenue, in which you say, look, this storm did this kind of a situation. This was the damage that came out of this. This is not just the money you need to repair what you lost, but the structural improvement you need in order to avoid this happening again.
But what if you get down there and find out? What if you
hang on? If you drive on the Sawmill River Parkway, you saw that there was a mile of the Sawmill River Parkway that was reconstructed over the last 2 years to raise it up. That's what you need. You need that to happen on a host of other areas where it's possible. There are parts of the Bronx River Parkway that no engineering can solve, but there are parts of it that can be made better, and that's what you do.
What if you get
go
down there and you
fight.
find out that the other people with these problems are Republicans?
Well, you work with them as well. I worked with Republicans in Albany, and I work with Republicans right now in White Plains. If you find common interest, you give an advancement. May I give you an example? I mentioned about the whole tech release of poisonous water into the Hudson River. there was a bill in Albany that was moving, but it needed to have some bipartisan support. What could I do? I'm a county executive. I got together with the other 4 county executives in the Hudson Valley. 3 of them are Republicans, Steve Newhouse in Orange County, Kevin Byrne in Putnam, Ed Day in Rockland County, and then Jen Metzger, the Democrat from Ulster. And I talked them into joining me in a press conference where all 5 of us opposed the dumping of the Holtec stuff. What did that do? We had no direct power, but it sent a message to the governor and the state legislature. There was bipartisan support, and then ultimately Pete Harkin, the senator, and Dana Levenberg, the assemblywoman, got those bills passed. Now, 3 weeks after that happened, the first migrant placing came up from the city. My colleagues that I was with on the Holtec thing all came out with protests. We want to have executive order. We don't want these migrants here. I did something different. I said to the Adams administration, we'll work with you, we'll show humanitarian concern, and we accepted ultimately what became 3 placements in Westchester County. Westchester did what none of the other counties did. What's the moral of the story? You're together on an issue where you have agreement. But that doesn't mean you stay together on issues where you go apart. Somebody calls me MAGA. Did they see how I handled the migrants? Come on now. I mean, there's one thing to have politics and disagreement. It's another thing to try to do what Donald Trump does, which is rewrite the truth. And you have to know as a mature legislator when you form coalitions that will help accomplish things, wherever those coalitions take you.
But on the migrant issue, George, I mean, is that not, correct me if I'm wrong, is that not threatening to spill over into Westchester? Because there seems to be no slowdown of people that are coming in across the border. New York City is full. Westchester has already absorbed a tiny, tiny portion of the migrants. But how sure are we at this point that we will not have to absorb more because there's no stopping the flow?
Well, Adina, it's a federal problem. And if I do go to Washington, then we need a federal solution. The city of New York, Westchester County, the state of New York cannot solve the migrant issue. Right now, what you have is you have a disaster at the border, and the Texas governor, on his own volition, is putting them on buses. He's not sending them to Chattanooga, Tennessee. He's not sending them to Tupelo, Mississippi. He's sending them to New York City and Chicago and Philadelphia on purpose. And they even sent a plane load into Martha's Vineyard to make a point. But now in Washington, that's where the solution has to come. And the solution has to involve doing a bipartisan, multifaceted new bill. And you have to figure out how you can find the resources to do this. To get out there and to argue and to, as I said, do press conference and shout out on people ain't going to accomplish anything. You're going to need more border security, without question. You're also going to have to restructure the way the proclaiming of asylum is, because right now it is easy to proclaim asylum. It is not easy to get asylum. And the people that are coming in here are highly likely to not be granted asylum, given the way the rules of asylum are structured. But then now they're here. You need to structure a program that allows people from other countries to work here, because we have a deficit in workforce, and we need people to come in and work and do certain kinds of things. And if we can channel that, and that's what the border control is for, so you can vet the people when they come in, then you can satisfy the natural desire that people have to work and have a better life, but at the same time not flood them into an area the way it's happening now with Texas. All of these things require a rational approach to government and the ability to talk to other people who have different philosophies than you do, but on a particular issue where you find common ground. And I've seen that happen in Albany, and Albany's not an easy place to get to compromise, let's be honest. But I've seen it happen in other levels of government. That's what I would bring to Washington, D.C., that mindset.
All right, I think that's going to wrap it up for us. We've taken a lot of your time. George, we know you have a very demanding government job when you're not running for office, and we thank you for that. So
it meshes together, Charles.
And please send me when you're going to be in a diner in the White Plains area. My wife and I will meet you on a Sunday morning there.
So
okay, sounds good. Thank you very much for your time.
I want to put in my thanks also, George, for responding. I mean, every time we've reached out to you, you've always been there,
yes.
And that says a
yes,
lot.
Yes, most
well,
definitely.
thank you. I appreciate that. Guys, take care. If you need me again down the line,
Thank you
let
very
me
much.
know.